Hi everybody, I'm Steve, and I recently posted a video where I mentioned a YouTuber named Peter who lives in North Carolina. The name of his channel is Retire Early with Me. He's set to retire at the end of this year, 2024. And if you watched that video, you may remember that I was shocked when he posted a video about his monthly expenses and just how low they are. His home is twice the size of ours here in Palm Springs, California. And like Palm Springs, he lives in a very warm state. North Carolina can get very warm and humid in the summer. Just like here in Palm Springs, we don't get the humidity, but we do get the heat. It gets up to 120 degrees at least a few times every summer. So when he mentioned that his air conditioning bill in the summer was, I think it was like $100 a month. I had to go back a little bit and watch it again because I thought I must have misunderstood him. This summer, last month, August, was I think $560 for the month. Now we do have a pool, and the pool pump runs about 8 hours a day, but it's a newer pump. It's extremely efficient, runs on a very low speed for those 8 hours. So I'm not sure how much the pool pump really contributes to the electric bill, but still, for his house to be twice the size of ours, and for him to have a $100 a month electric bill in the middle of summer, that's a huge difference. We're paying 5 times as much as him for a house half the size. And honestly, that was the first time I think that I'd ever really compared our electric bill and all of our utilities with someone from another state and realized just how much more we're paying here. So that, could have been a one-off. But then I was also watching recently another channel that I just discovered called Buzz's Retirement Garage. And Buzz retired just a year ago, I think this week. He just posted his latest video where he celebrated his 1-year retirement anniversary. And like Peter, at the end of every month, he shares with his audience all of his expenses, or him and his wife, their expenses for the month. And again, like Peter, pretty much everything was much, much lower than our expenses for the month. But Buzz lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and I can't remember now what his electric bill was, but it was much lower than ours, I think. I've been to Cleveland. I've heard it gets very, very hot and humid there as well in the summer. I don't know if it gets as hot as it does here or in North Carolina, but I think their summers get pretty hot as well. But the item on his list that really got my attention was his car insurance. And he even made a point of saying that everyone who watches his channel is surprised about how little they pay for car insurance. And I think he said he was paying $72 a month for his auto insurance. My auto insurance just went up to almost $2,000 a year. I don't know, what is that, like $180 or something a month for auto insurance? And I don't drive. I mean, I rarely drive. So you would think my auto insurance at my age with an excellent driving record, and we also bundle, quite a few of you mentioned that, we should bundle it with the house and with other things. We bundle it with everything. So we get the lowest possible rate, the discount rate, and we have all of the discounts for being good drivers. So that's $2,000 a year each. So we're paying I think we're paying around $4,000 a year for auto insurance, and that's with excellent driving records and bundled with all of our other insurance. So the reason I mention these two channels is because they both really opened my eyes to just how much more we are spending just because we live here in California. I was born and raised here, I grew up here, I love California. Weighing the good and the bad here in California, I still think it's one of the most wonderful places to live here in the US and probably anywhere in the world. We have the most beautiful weather, some of the most beautiful cities, some of the most beautiful beaches, beautiful mountains. I mean, we really do have it all here. That's why over the years, everyone has moved to California and we have such a huge population. And over the years, of course, I've complained, probably since I got my driver's license, how expensive gas was, especially compared to other states. When we're paying $4 a gallon for regular gas, most of the rest of the country is paying half of that, maybe $2 a gallon. And I've always been aware of that, so I knew gas was more expensive than most everywhere else. I've also always been aware that home prices here are usually much, much more than other parts of the country. I remember the first time I really realized that was back in the 1990s. I had a job where they flew me back to Louisville, Kentucky. Single family homes in Louisville, Kentucky at that time. Nice homes, very nice homes. Seemed to be in nice neighborhoods and everything. I think the prices were like $30,000, $40,000 for really nice homes. Most of the Midwest and the South had just, for what we consider bargain basement prices. I mean, just dirt cheap homes, really large, beautiful, nice homes in and around really nice cities in nice states. And I remember thinking, gosh, we should move back to the Midwest and we'll be millionaires. And this was back when we were in our 30s and just getting started. I was like, wow, it's so different. So I was aware of those two things, but I just never really thought about everything else also being expensive. In fact, I had no idea until I watched Peter's channel that utilities could be that different from state to state. I guess I just always assumed that utilities would, electric and gas and water, that they would all be pretty similar from state to state. I don't know, it's not something I guess I had really thought about much or at all. But when I realized that he was paying just a tiny little fraction of what we're paying for the same thing for electric, it really got me thinking about just how much more money we spend here in California, just to be able to live in California. I consider us very lucky, very fortunate that we have the money to live here and pay these ridiculously high prices on everything. Maybe because I've always lived here and I've always paid these prices that I just never paid that much attention to them or compared them to other places. Now, I have heard for years that you could move to other countries after you retire and save a fortune. And so I was aware of that, but I have no interest in moving to another country to save money. My brother, Robert, he retired, I think he was 55, about 5 years ago. He moved to Thailand, and the prices there are unbelievably low for most everything. Not everything. Some things have to be imported in, like he paid the same amount or more when he bought a car there as you would pay here in California. But his housing is just dirt cheap. Food is dirt cheap. I mean, everything is super, super affordable there. And he loves it. He says he's never coming back. He doesn't plan to ever come back to the US. He loves it there. And I think that's awesome. But for me, I just have such an attachment. I think we have very different personalities. And because of his job, he moved from state to state his entire career. He lived in Hawaii for a while. He lived in Nebraska. He lived in Florida. He lived in Arizona. I mean, he just moved around. With each move was another promotion and did really well, and really didn't develop many attachments, if any attachments, to the places, people, places, and friends where he lived. He's single. And so it was very easy for him to just move to another country. So for him, it doesn't really matter if he lives here in Los Angeles or if he lives in Bangkok. So at first when I saw these channels and these prices, I was like, wow, this is so unfair that we have to spend so much more money for everything here in California. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, some of these other places, even though the prices are low, you have to deal with humidity, and I just cannot deal with humidity. So I'll gladly pay more, a premium, to live in an area that's not humid. In fact, we have just the opposite issue. We have dry heat. There's almost no humidity. You dry up like a prune here in the summer. Well, most of the year. I grew up here in Southern California with no humidity. So we could live in a state that's a lot cheaper than here. But if we had to deal with the humidity, I would just be miserable all the time. So you have to think about that too. Same thing with the snow. I could never live anywhere where there was snow. I, again, grew up here in Southern California. We don't have snow. We see it in the mountains. It's very beautiful to look at, but we don't have to actually shovel our driveway or whatever. So I think part of the expense, the premium of living in California, is that we do have much nicer weather than much of the rest of the country. So personally, I'm willing to spend that extra money just to be in a place that has much nicer weather most of the time. That said, my whole life, I've always been a person who has a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. I always like to plan for all the worst case scenarios. And so it gives me peace of mind knowing At this age, I've learned to never say never, but the likelihood of us ever moving out of California, there's an almost zero chance of us ever moving out of California. But I like the idea if the entire economy collapsed and we lost everything, it's nice to know that you could live in your car or an RV or something in one of these really, really cheap states, and it would probably be a lot less expensive than living in California. So I just, in the back of my mind, it's kind of comforting to know that there are still places in this country, or even in the world, where you can live very, very affordably. You can live on a shoestring budget. So if we ever needed to do that, it's nice to know there are lots and lots and lots of places where we could do that. I can't imagine that ever happening, but you never know. I feel so grateful that we're able to afford to live in this very expensive state. But it's nice to know, if we didn't, that we could move somewhere else and still live a very nice lifestyle, very affordably. So all of this that I'm talking about made me start wondering, is California the most expensive place to retire to here in the US? Is it the worst place to retire here in the US because of prices and other things? So I finally, after all these years, I thought, well, why don't I just Google it? So I Googled something like, is California the worst state in the US to retire? And a couple of articles did come up where they listed from number one, the best states in the country to retire, to the worst. And I guess the Bankrate website annually comes up with their list. And their list for 2024 said that the number one best state to retire here in the US is Delaware. Apparently Delaware is, according to Bankrate, the number one place to live. What I was really more interested in is which state was considered the bottom or the worst. Unfortunately, California did make the list on Bankrate. So number 50, the worst state to retire to, according to Bankrate, is Alaska. And because of the remoteness, I would imagine everything's much more expensive to ship in. So that doesn't surprise me. And then all the snow, the weather, it's probably a very, very difficult life there, I'm guessing, especially as a retiree. Number 49, New York. Again, very expensive like California. Number 48, Washington State. And number 47, California. We're not the worst state to retire in, but according to Bankrate, we're the fourth worst state to retire in. Number 46, number 5 on the list, or 5 from the bottom of the list, was North Dakota. And again, maybe the remoteness, I don't know. But yeah, this year, California came in number 47 out of 50 as being one of the least desirable places to retire to. Cost of living, healthcare, taxes, crime, weather, and just overall quality of life. So those were the criteria that they used to determine which were the best states here in the US to retire as of 2024. So I'm curious, do you agree with their list? Do you live in any of the states that they consider, like California, to be one of the worst places to retire? Or do you live in one of the places on their list that they consider one of the best places to retire? And I'm sure if you go online and do your own search, there's probably other resources where they use similar criteria and where they have their own lists. And I think every year AARP does a list. I haven't looked at that recently. The next time that comes out, I'll have to see what their list is. I think they do. So for us, the bottom line is, even though we live in one of the worst states here in the US for retirees, and I think here it's mostly because of affordability. I mean, we have some of the best weather in the country. We have fantastic entertainment, and I think we have really good health care, relatively low crime, or maybe even really low crime. Again, it depends on where in the state you live. But I don't think we have a huge crime rate here, unless maybe you're in one of the major cities. I think in most of the areas, I think we're pretty good. I think where we really fall down here in California is the affordability factor. So I just want to give a very big shout out and thank you to Peter and Buzz for sharing all your financials like you do online. It's been very helpful and very enlightening. I've always kept my own spreadsheet of expenses, so I know what my budget is, I know what my expenses, and same with Jim. We know what our expenses are and what our budget is and how much we make and how much we spend. So we're aware of all those things. Never occurred to me to share them on this channel with others like you two do. And also, there are a couple other channels that do the same thing. I don't know who started it, but it's all very, very helpful because it allows you as a retiree to compare what your expenses are in one state compared to other retirees in other states. I'm guessing there are probably a lot of retirees, and especially people who haven't yet retired, who are planning to retire or thinking about retiring in the near future or distant future, and trying to decide which state would be the best state to retire in. Now, you can Google it and read articles about it, but I think it's kind of interesting to actually watch a YouTube channel where someone's actually living in that state and they're sharing their exact utilities and exact expenses. Thank you guys for doing this. Very helpful. And I started last month, I think, sharing our expenses. I'm going to continue to do that as well because I do think it's very helpful to be able to compare from state to state and even country to country, because I know a lot of you do watch from other countries. How cool is it to use technology like YouTube to help retirees live a more affordable life or find an affordable place to live, especially those who are on a limited budget? This is definitely something that didn't exist 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I think social media has really helped retirees in a lot of ways that retirees like my parents and my grandparents, they didn't have the benefit of being able to compare with other retirees all over the country and all over the world. Feel free to share where you think is the worst place to retire, maybe on the planet. I mean, that'd be kind of interesting to know. Maybe here in the US and then just the broader planet itself. It would be fun to see if there's a consensus where there's one particular place where everyone agrees is probably the worst place to retire. So I'll look forward, as always, to reading your comments about what you think is the worst place to retire. But until then, take care, everybody, and I'll see you all next time.